Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's Fireside Chat. I'm Lisa Stearns, and I'm here with the star of the show, Senior Vice President Tim Cross. We do have a lot to talk about today as we look to re-entering our workplaces. And also stick with us to the end because we will be debuting the last of our video series where we're showcasing our UTIA family. I think you'll want to see that. So a couple housekeeping things. Remember to keep your audio muted so that everyone can hear the conversation. Use the chat function if you have a question that you would like Dr. Cross to answer. You can use the public chat or you can send it to me privately. Also, there will be a recording made of this session today and it will be posted on the UTIA coronavirus website. So let's just jump in to today's information. And Tim, obviously things have loosened up in the state and testing has increased. Do you feel that this influenced the university's decision to re-enter the workplace in a phased approach?
Thanks, Lisa. Great question. Great way to start off here this afternoon. And let me first just say welcome back, everyone. As Lisa mentioned, week 7. Who in the world would have thought we'd be doing this for 7 weeks if you think back a month or two ago? But I really appreciate this continued opportunity to meet with everyone, and thank you for taking the time this afternoon to join us. So let's think about what we've been seeing in the media, on the news, on the web, and so forth. Clearly, there is a bit of momentum, if you will, towards reopening our workforce and our economy. If you've been watching the statistics, though, you've actually seen some increases recently in the state of Tennessee with regard to the total number of cases. However, I think we also recognize much of those increases, we believe, are due to some really concentrated testing that's been going on. In particular, I know our prisons and some of our senior centers, they've been testing 100% of the individuals in some of those facilities, and they've been finding some high concentrations of positive cases. So I think that's certainly a part of the reason why we saw some increases. I'm no epidemiologist, so I don't want to go too deep into all the data and statistics that's out there. But I will say, as I watch in a general sense what's happening, since about Monday, the number of active cases in Tennessee has remained almost flat at 7,000. And, you know, I think that's positive news for us. It at least means we're not seeing spikes and increases in the number of cases. And really, what we're starting to see is that the number of positive cases that's identified daily is being offset by the number of active cases that are in recovery mode or have recovered daily. So we appear to be at a more stable level of the virus in terms of infection level. And I think that then is the basis for saying, well, things aren't getting worse. And so let's begin to slowly but carefully and safely re-enter our workplaces, re-enter society, if you will. Whether you're with higher education or whether you're with any industry, we're certainly seeing much more movement back towards office places and places of work across the state. And I think then the university is no exception to that. The important thing to me is that we do, again, very carefully, slowly, and safely make those changes.
So we've been hearing about the university's plan for a phased approach. So can you give us some guidance on implementing phase 1, what that will look like, which is intended to go through May 29th?
Yeah, so phase 1, and here's where it gets tougher to describe because we do have different requirements and guidance depending on which unit you're with within the Institute. And that's because we face different circumstances. I've been saying for 2 weeks now, it was really easy to close things down, if you will, to shift into a working remotely mode because we could say to everyone, no matter what unit they were with, go home, do your work from home. Let's socially isolate, shelter in place, And that was a universal message that was clear, understandable, very specific. As we think about phasing back, it becomes much more challenging. And I think the messages already, I'm sure there's some confusion, and hopefully today we can start to address some of that. I don't know that we'll resolve every bit of it because it is situation specific in many cases, but I think we do have some overall guidance that we can follow. So let me start with talking a little bit about our campus plans, and then we'll talk very briefly about other plans. And maybe I need to preface all this by saying the College of Veterinary Medicine really has remained in an operating mode throughout this entire pandemic. They've been seeing emergency and critical care patients and are now thinking about scaling up for additional client visits as well. So virtually none of what I have to say has a lot to do with College of Veterinary Medicine, except that everyone is following some baseline practices. So, and those are generally the CDC guidance for any agency, business, or firm that's entering into a phased reopening. So on campus beginning Monday, first of all, everyone who can work remotely should continue working remotely. So that's, again, not a change. We've been in that mode 7 weeks now and will remain in that mode. But for those who cannot work remotely, or those who were listed as being really needed back on campus, like facilities, like campus security, College of Veterinary Medicine, and some others, they should begin to return to work. They should be in touch with their supervisors, and they should make plans to carry out their responsibilities. The way they do it may change. We're certainly across the board going to require every employee who returns to the workplace to complete a checklist every day, answering questions about how they feel, if they're experiencing a fever, if they have any headache, sore throat, loss of taste or smell, and if there are yes answers to any of those, we're going to say, don't come to work, stay home, contact your medical provider, and see if there's some follow-up that's needed. So all of us, regardless of what unit we're in, really are going to be responsible for that. And I know you're saying, well, where's that checklist? How do I do that? What are the specific questions? We're going to provide more guidance on that in the coming weeks. And in fact, plans right now are to roll that out to everyone as a part of a short training program, and then make sure every individual has that specific information that they've been exposed to. So we'll address phase one, not only on campus, but across the state, using that training and using that health checklist. The other thing we will certainly do is I'd like to say require face masks. I realize it's still a personal decision, but if you're in a place that's a public area that you're, bound to come into close contact, less than 6 feet distance from other individuals, you need to wear a face mask. And that's no different than going to the grocery store, in my opinion. If you're going to be around other people, it's only wise to wear a face mask. And it's really, in my opinion, a show of respect for others that you're doing that. So that will be a part of our phase one guidance for all units as well. And then certainly for everyone, and this goes maybe doubly for our off-campus folks, be in touch with your supervisor, know what the expectations are, know if you really need to be present or if you can and should continue to work remotely. And that, again, may be a different situation depending on which county you're in or which area you're in. So let me remind you that there are specific phase one guidelines. Those are all available on the UTIA COVID-19 website. If you go to that website and then look under guidance, you'll find, first of all, our guidelines that are still in place, as well as then specifics for phase one reentry that apply to campus or apply to ag research, research and education centers off campus, or that apply to our off-campus UT extension facilities. So let's, again, remind ourselves we want to stay healthy. we want to assess our health daily, and we want to be sure that if we're coming to work, we should be coming to work. And if we can work remotely, let's continue to do that if at all possible. So I've covered a lot of ground there. There may be some follow-up questions, but hopefully that gives an overview of our phase 1 guidance.
So any guidance as we prepare for phase 2?
Yeah. All right, my guidance for preparing for phase 2 is do phase 1 really well, and then we'll get to phase 2. We're part of the whole society that is really dealing with this. And the extent to which we keep ourselves healthy, the extent to which we follow CDC guidance has an impact on those that we come into contact with, obviously, others in the community. So the extent to which we do our part to keep the number of cases low and hopefully declining will enable us to reach phase 2. So rather than go into a lot of details about what does phase 2 look like and what changes are required there, I'd really like to just focus on phase 1 right now. Let's make sure we do it well and keep everyone healthy. And that will, I think, position us then to move into phase 2. On campus, phase 2 will not happen prior to the end of May 29th, or if you want to think about it, we wouldn't begin to enter phase 2 until any earlier than June 1. On our off-campus offices, we're really going to be triggering that off of local guidance from county mayors, county government, who will obviously be looking at their own local data and their own number of active cases, number of recoveries, and so forth. So let's not get in a big hurry for phase 2. Let's get phase 1 done, and let's get that done well. And then with any luck, we'll be in a great position to enter phase 2.
And it's probably important to note that phase 2 isn't necessarily going to be the same for every unit. Could look
again, that could differ unit by unit. So there's, again, and there is some guidance already provided on phase 2, but I suspect we'll refine that. We'll learn from phase 1, and then we may want to make some revisions there, which is another good reason not to get too wrapped up in what phase 2 looks like today, because we will learn as things go. Think back just 3 weeks ago, we weren't even talking about re-entry to the workplace. So this is a dynamic situation that changes rather rapidly, it seems, and we want to do our very best to, most importantly, go back to our top priority, which is ensuring the safety and health of our employees, our students, and our stakeholders. So keep in mind, everything we're talking about, it really ties back to that goal as well as the other 3 goals that we had.
So we're in a time where a little good news is more than welcome. And I understand that you do have some good news, at least, to share in some areas. So,
it seems like we're spending our lives either asking what the rules are or explaining what the rules are. And, it wears on you, right? It does on me, and I suspect on you as well. So let's think about maybe something that doesn't relate to rules or guidelines. What are some positive things going on? And I made a little list myself. I hope each of you think about some of the positive things that you're experiencing as well every day. It's easy to get caught up in the negative, in worries about the coronavirus and how that's impacting our lives. But let's also recognize there's some positive things happening. Number 1 on my list, we have no active cases, no positive cases in the Institute of Agriculture. I think that's phenomenal. That's outstanding. And that really indicates to me we have been following our own advice. We've been following our guidelines. So number 1 on my list, no positive cases. Number 2, we continue to get great examples of innovative and successful programs being offered or conducted by distance using really creative approaches. I think about things like we've got a virtual 4-H exchange going on from Murray County with some 4-Hers out in Colorado. That probably would not have happened without coronavirus. So congratulations to those groups for linking up and getting that experience. There's many cases I could cite as examples the real point there is we're being creative, we're being innovative, we're doing those things we need to do anyway, even in light of this pandemic. You know, the UT system and all the campuses have announced this week plans for students to return to campus this fall, obviously if conditions permit. And that continues to guide much of what we do. But, you know, I think that's a positive note as well. We're planning for that. We're not hoping for it. We're not, you know, just going to see if luck holds out and we can get there. We're actually taking proactive steps to get to that point that students can come back. And I know our school systems, I believe, are in that same mode, really planning for how can we bring our students back. So I think that's a positive. At least we've turned a corner there to some extent. Here's a good one. You may have seen a message just recently. May is going to be a health insurance benefit holiday. So during the month of May, the insurance premiums will not be deducted from your paycheck. So there's a financial positive for you. You'll have just a little bit of an increase in pay. So good news for that. And maybe that means an extra dip of ice cream or an extra cup of coffee, or maybe it means you can buy a really special mask with that added payroll amount. Let me just remind folks of a positive that maybe in these times it kind of goes unnoticed or maybe unrecognized. We've got something called annual leave, and what that means is you can take some time off. And so don't forget, even though we're in this weird mode of working remotely, and it seems like if you're like me, when you're at home, you're working, and so if you're always at home, you're always working, take some time off if you feel like you need to. Work with your supervisor again. You need to make sure your boss is informed and supportive, but don't forget that annual leave is still a thing, and you've got that benefit out there to take advantage of. And then finally, let me just mention that we've done surveys of faculty and staff, just asking, how are you doing? And our staff responses, which came in most recently, were incredibly positive and very, I think, indicative of our workforce. We asked, you know, how are you doing? And about 2/3 said, I'm doing great, I'm doing fine, you know, no troubles. About 1/3 said, well, I'm okay, I'm managing. And about 2% said, gosh, I need some help. And I think that's a great thing, that most of the folks out there feel like they're doing okay. And for that 2%, I know we're in the process of reaching out to say, how can we help? Are there some things you need? Are there some programs that we need to try to shore up for you or provide? So that's a very positive sign and assessment on the part of our workforce. And I think we had very similar results for faculty and staff on campus as well. So across the state, indications are you all are doing a good job. You're hanging in there. There's some that need some help. And if you need something, this is a good opportunity to remind you, please reach out and let us know. If we're not aware, we're not going to be very helpful or supportive to you. So please be in touch if there are some things that you need. So let me just stop. There's my list of positives, Lisa. I hope that triggers some thoughts for each of you as to what are some positive things that have been going on.
Well, it's definitely triggered some questions. We have quite a few, so we're going to jump right in. And in that survey, I think it was work family responsibilities that some people had concerns about. And so one of our questions is related to that. This is a supervisor asking, saying, I'm getting a lot of concerns from staff about childcare. Lots of childcare places have officially closed for the summer. What is your recommendation on addressing this issue during the phase-in approach, and you know, in a way that's fair for everyone?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think I reflect back that when we started into this, we said, you know what, we need to be creative, but we also need to be flexible and we need to be compassionate. And we recognize that you know, schools are out, daycares, child care centers are closed, and that is not going to change for the next probably several weeks or maybe several months. And so I think we need to be flexible on that. If employees are in a situation where they really are unable to return to work, let's work with those employees to determine what can be done from home, help them to be able to continue to do their responsibilities or some other related tasks if we need to enable them to provide their childcare when none other is available and get through the pandemic. So I think, again, that's a case-by-case basis. I can't make an assignment to each person, but I would encourage our supervisors to be flexible, to work with those who are in circumstances that it would be really difficult, if not impossible, for them to return on a regular basis to the office. And if we get to a point where we are largely back to work, even then, I think we could consider, having had this experience, are there opportunities for individuals maybe to have a flexible work schedule or to work partially at home and partially in the office or at the workplace? We don't have to go back to a one-size-fits-all necessarily. Let's look at the responsibilities and just see what opportunities there are there. So that'd be my best answer today. And again, that's got to be worked through with an individual supervisor. If you need some input or help from our human resources folks, don't hesitate to reach out to them as well.
Okay. A UT Extension County office is asking if there's any guidance on all staff getting tested, even if staff are asymptomatic.
At this point, we don't have the capacity or any plans to test everyone in any unit, whether it's Extension or any other part of the Institute. We've talked, and our task force has actually had conversations with the UT Health Science Center. And honestly, there might be some helpful information if we did that. But think about it, that information would only be valid for a day or two, because immediately upon testing, a person leaves and comes into contact with others, and all you've got is a snapshot of information. So it may be helpful in the short term, but really what would be more helpful, in my opinion, it would be a test that would prove whether there was resistance, whether there was some protection, as in had already had the coronavirus and now were immune, if you will. But those antibody tests are still in the development stage. They're not 100% reliable, and we're not in a position where we could offer an antibody test to every person in the organization either. So I know there's a lot of conversation about testing right now, and there's a task force on campus looking exclusively at testing, and we're going to continue to explore that. And if there is an opportunity to provide a test that would be really valuable and helpful to all, we'll certainly do that. And let me assure that, while those tests are expensive, if that were possible, money is not going to be the thing that holds us up from doing that. Right now, it's really the technology and the accuracy and reliability is what the concerns are. So now, having said all that, if there's a free testing opportunity in your community and you want to take advantage, by all means. I sure don't want to in any way discourage someone from being tested, but as an organization, we really just don't have the capacity nor the structure to carry that out, and that's true on campus for other colleges as well. So we're meantime tracking what's possible, and we'll continue to explore alternatives as new technologies and new tests are developed.
So this is a question coming from an extension agent, however it could apply, I think, to others as well, and that is just seeking some guidance on expectations for staff who are indeed working at home. What is that supposed to look like?
So for any of us working from home, I think those expectations have to be agreed upon, again, with your supervisor. And if that doesn't seem to resolve the questions, then maybe the next person in the supervisory chain could be of help. So I would think it really depends on your role, what those expectations are. I don't think, the past 7 weeks, we have expected that each person is fully focused on only work from 8 a.m. until 5 p.m. I think we recognize, we've been home and managing children or having other family responsibilities that we have to do simultaneously. I certainly recognize that you've got children in the house. You're not going to be fully focused for 8 straight hours, and then you're going to clock out and do something else. So certainly our expectations are that the way we carry out our duties may be slightly different than in the past, but I think whatever you're responsible for, whether it's education or administrative support or research support, in a general sense, you're still responsible for that. It's impossible to carry it out from home, then maybe you're one of those that need to consider at what point it would be helpful to return to the workplace. But beyond that, I really think the most important thing is to check with your supervisor and either clarify that what you're doing is what's expected, or clarify what isn't getting done that needs to be done, and work out an arrangement to be sure those responsibilities are covered.
And then someone else is asking about travel outside of the state as we move into phase 1. If a person does indeed travel outside of the state, do they have to do the 14-day self-quarantine? And can they telecommute as opposed to taking that as leave? I would assume yes.
So there's probably 6 or 7 questions in there. First of all, we still have travel restrictions through July 31st. We said when we set that date that we would reassess. I don't see changing that date right now. So as of today, those travel restrictions are still in place, and that's for out-of-state travel as well as international travel. There is a travel exceptions request process. So you can contact the dean's office and request an exception, and that will route through to me eventually, and we'll consider that. It needs to be, I think in our UTIA guidelines, it says it really needs to be something very, very critical and very important for it to warrant an exception. So we're trying to maintain our current batting average of 0 positive cases, and the extent to which we stay in our local communities, I think that has helped. At least it hasn't hurt, right? So we want to continue that. If it's a really critical travel event that without it, there's going to be harm to students or harm to research projects that's irreparable, or maybe harm to some extension program or veterinary practice that really can't be prevented, we can grant an exception. And in that case, then I would expect a 14-day self-quarantine to take place, because invariably, unless it's automobile travel, if it's air travel, then you're going to be in contact with people from potentially anywhere in the world. So we would want to have that self-quarantine period covered. And then the question is, I think, well, could that be, remote working during that period? And yes, that would be absolutely fine. No trouble there.
So here are maybe some easy ones, and we'll knock these out quickly here.
That's all right. These are great questions. I hope my ramblings here are helping. We continue to build the plane as we fly it, I'm afraid. So,
well, we're getting quite a few, so we're going to try to get through these here.
Good.
So these are all facility related questions. One is, will mail and delivery start being delivered to offices starting Monday because we're in phase 1?
No.
Okay.
Finally got a short answer.
And will the buildings still be locked?
Yes.
Okay.
Another short answer.
There you go.
Phase 1 is not a lot different than what we've done for the past 7 weeks.
Exactly. It really is a continuance, as you said. This one's facilities related, but a little more interesting, and that is the ability of extending Wi-Fi into the greenhouses and parking lots, particularly for students as they start to come back in the fall and maybe are in those areas more than in a classroom.
So the question is, can we, I guess?
Yes.
I know we've got Wi-Fi down in the gardens, so that might be something for us to look at. I've actually just read an article in Chronicle of Higher Ed, I believe, about adding Wi-Fi to parking garages and parking lots, and maybe that's something we should look at as well. So I'd certainly be open to checking on that, and if it's something that could be done and would provide benefits to our students and potentially faculty and staff, certainly in favor of that.
So has there been this? Oh,
Just making myself a note.
there you go. So has there been any discussion, we've had a couple questions on this, any discussion about being able to start scheduling events past the July 31st date? It would be helpful, as some said, to know whether or not they can begin rescheduling events.
Boy, I agree. And I'm in that same boat, actually, really struggling with, do we think that events will happen in August or not? If those that are out there and have a great crystal ball and know what the number of cases will be in August, please let me know, because my crystal ball isn't real clear on this. I think large events with hundreds of people, I would be quite surprised if we're doing those kinds of things in August, but it's possible. So I really hesitate to say absolutely yes or absolutely no. Clearly, things like football, is that going to happen? And I'm not just talking about UT football, even at the high school level. I know that there's many people thinking about athletic events and what will happen this fall. I just don't think we're there yet. And so when it comes to other kinds of events, I suspect smaller events, maybe more than 10, but less than 50, I think is more likely in August and beyond. I think as you go beyond 50, it's getting to be less and less likely that would be possible. But I may be wrong. Again, August is still more than 7 weeks away, and 7 weeks ago we were still doing big events. So things can change in a hurry, and let's hope they do.
So if it's under 50, could people start reserving rooms, or should they, or?
You can reserve it now, even if it's 1,000, but whether you can do it or not is the question. So it wouldn't hurt to make some tentative plans, but I would have a plan B in mind as well. I don't know if I shared this with an earlier chat, but I serve with a planning group for the Southern Association of Agricultural Scientists, and we're really struggling with whether we plan the annual conference that happens in February. That's a conference of about 1,500 people, faculty and students. And at this point, we're totally unclear about whether a February conference that brings people from across the country is possible or not. Mm-hmm. So I understand the frustration, the dilemma, the uncertainty, but at this point, I would always have a plan B, even if you think you might want to go ahead and make some tentative plans for events starting in August.
So here's, there are actually two questions related to budget, and I'm sort of putting these two together for you. One is, with reduced revenues in the state, are there plans to enact a staff reduction and cut positions across the state, especially with extension? And then somebody is also asking, do you think there'll be budget reductions for fiscal year 2021?
So the deans and I, Mr. Favre, have been talking about budget for 7 weeks now, because clearly, when the economy takes such a rapid downturn, there's going to be impacts on revenues. And my latest sort of data point on that this morning was Governor Lee in a conference call with ag industry leaders indicated that he's expecting we'll see about a $500,000 shortfall in revenues for the current fiscal year. And he's projecting about $1 billion shortfall for next fiscal year. So, you know, that seems like a realistic estimate to me, and you know, certainly significant as well, because we've been in positive budget revenues for the past 7 years or so. The question is, what does that do to state funding for higher education? If you look at a $500 million shortfall on a $34 billion budget, we're not talking about anywhere near 10%. It's much less than that. Even $1 billion out of 34 billion total is not a huge percent. On the other hand, $1 billion is real money, and it's got to come from somewhere. So I think state budget reductions for all agencies are likely. How much will be asked to bear is unknown at this point. So I wouldn't say we're making plans for staff reductions, but we are expecting. We need to be conservative. We need to be careful with our money. We need to consider how we go into this next fiscal year, and what we do in terms of filling positions, and how we handle existing operating funds. Are there things, some expenditures that we can delay, postpone, or eliminate altogether to maintain good positive balances? I think we need to do that, and we are. So we're certainly not, though, in a mode. You may see several states have announced furloughs at their universities. We're not in that mode, and I don't expect us to reach that level of difficulty anytime soon. But again, I can't guarantee what the future holds because we don't know just yet.
So we do have a couple of questions from faculty, and one asks about an email that went out regarding extension of the probationary period with a deadline in June, but the associate department has a deadline of December. So why are the junior faculty having to decide so soon? Well, I know I sent a note to department heads this week, and I did say, hey, you know, I'd like to have a list of the probationary faculty who would like an extension, partly because I was getting a lot of questions about it, and I think some faculty wanted to know, are we going to get the extension or not? So my thinking was, let's go ahead and collect that information now. We'll confirm with letters back to those faculty that their probationary period has been extended, and then that's one less worry for them. They can take that off the table. But the ability to provide this extension is embedded in the new Board of Trustees policy on tenure, and that's going to be there forever, or until it's changed sometime in the distant future. So there's really no deadline associated with that request. So that my goal of getting it soon was simply to put to rest any concerns faculty might have, and I thought collecting it all at once made it a whole lot easier than having each individual faculty member have to submit a request and then us respond individually. So it really wasn't to pressure anyone. And in fact, if a faculty member doesn't feel like they know at this point and want to wait, that's absolutely fine. But just providing that opportunity for those who are concerned that we can consider their request and approve it now. And that's one less thing to worry about. I'm not sure at all about the December 31 deadline. I'm not familiar with that and haven't seen it on a form, but in the meantime, I would certainly assure any probationary faculty, if you want to have an extension, talk with your department head and let's get that documented and approved, and we can move on. And if you want to wait on that, no problem. We're not, I don't know that we're prevented from considering that at any point in the future. And as a follow-up, which you may have actually just answered, but if the faculty take the option for adding a year as an insurance policy, then later feel they don't need it, can they go back to the original probationary period deadline? Well, so I've been saying it's not an insurance policy. If there was an impact on programs, on research, teaching, extension, clinical work, whatever, that should be the basis for the request for the extension. And I guess the question is, well, then if we recover from that faster than we thought, can we be considered, you know, on the original timeline? And the answer is yes. There
the requirement is a 6-year probationary period, and we would still, experience that 6-year probationary period. The only thing I would add to that is, before that's just assumed, it would be helpful if that's going to be a consideration by the faculty member, and I think the faculty handbook says the faculty member discusses the time for promotion with their department head, that we make sure the deans and the chief academic officer also weigh in on that. So that would be me, so that no one's surprised that we're reverting back to the original date in terms of that review. I would not consider someone who got the extension and then concluded that their dossier was warranted consideration on their original timeline. I wouldn't consider that early. What I would consider is that they're requesting not to utilize that 1-year extension that they were entitled to. So it would not trigger an early review of tenure, but rather just a normal review. So I think maybe that covered both parts of that question, hopefully adequately. Again, if there's specifics, happy to visit with faculty or department heads about that. And deans can certainly address questions about that as well.
Someone is asking, they said you had mentioned prisons and the spike in cases in those prisons. And in this particular county, there are 2 privately owned locations in the county, and they've had an outbreak causing the numbers in that county to go up. Does this play a role in the phase-in approach for those counties, or how do you suggest they handle that?
It does, because our guidance for off-campus offices is that it pay attention to what the local data shows for the counties that those facilities are located in. And you might say, well, we don't do any work at the prison, so that wouldn't impact us. But think about the fact that all of the employees in any facility like that are also, going to be members of that community. There's obviously opportunities for transmission of a population from any one facility throughout the community. So I think it could possibly have an impact, but I think, again, county government, county mayors, other county officials are going to want to factor that into their thoughts about moving from phase 1 to phase 2 as well. So I don't think it's entirely on us to make those calls. We need to do it in concert with our local leaders. But I do think that data is going to have an impact. It's bound to.
So we're going to take just a couple of more questions to be mindful of everyone's time. But this one is following up on this whole idea of events. And some have contracts in place past August for, say, a wedding or some sort of an event. Should those contracts be honored, or what do we do with those?
So if it's our facility hosting an event like a wedding, again, I think it's possible that we'll be able to do those events, but it's hard to know for certain. And I think maybe a conversation with the individuals who have those contracts is the starting place on that, because they may not want to have their wedding at our facility if their wedding guests aren't going to be able to travel, for example. So I think that's number one. We've said number two that we wouldn't impose penalties to the extent we could. We'd be very flexible with individuals that chose to cancel those contracts or change those contracts, postpone them would be our preference probably. So I think at this point it may be premature to cancel things that are on the books for August, September, October, but I think it might be helpful to have a conversation with those individual parties to see if their plans have changed in any way, and just to stay in touch with them so that we know what their expectations are, and they know that we're watching this carefully. I don't think want to hold events that bring virus contamination possibilities to our facilities if those facilities are places where we work and have frequent involvement. So I think we want to be careful what exposure we're placing on our employees, and then we also want to create the safest possible environment for anyone wanting to do events with us. So those would be the considerations I would think about. So is that a hard and fast, yes, you can do those events, or no, you can't. I'm afraid it's not, but I'm afraid I can't provide that hard and fast guidance at this date.
And there was one follow-up on the county information you gave. Should that include recovered cases as well, or just be looking at active cases?
It is really laid out very nicely, I think, in the UT Extension Phase 1 or phased reentry guidelines. Honestly, from memory, I don't recall exactly which data points they suggested, but I think what's in there are just some examples of data that could be looked at, but we really need to take our cue and our lead from local government leaders. So even if we see something that seems to say, yes, we should go to phase 2, or no, we shouldn't, we've got to do that in concert with our local leaders, or else I don't think we'll be good partners, and nor will we have as strong a basis for whichever action is being taken.
Okay, and one last question, and this is, again, more of a facilities one, and those using labs, but when can state service engineers come back to the labs to service instruments?
So that would be a visitor to campus, I guess. And at this point, I think visitors are not allowed back, which is hence why buildings remain locked. You know, I don't know that I've had that question before, and I haven't heard any discussion about that. I'm wondering if, you know, I'm going to use a lifeline here. Dave White, are you with us on the chat today? And is that something you might be able to address for us? I'm looking to see if...
Can you hear me?
Yeah, sure can. Dave, go right ahead. Thank you.
Thanks. Sorry, I was multitasking. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, I think the question, well, Lisa, you've got it in front of you. I'll let you read it.
Yes, so the question is, if and when can we have state service engineers come back into our labs to service instruments?
Wow, that's a great question. So right now, currently, we've rolled out these health safety action plans to be filled out by principal investigators. And it's in a new form called a VOCI, I think, or VOCI. And I know many of our faculty are going through this today, and I appreciate the extra effort to do this, as well as the department heads for approving. After it does get approval, it will produce a PDF that will be posted in the laboratory that will list all the health safety guidelines to be practiced in the lab by personnel. That will also include visitors. So my guess would be it could happen as long as they have the health safety guidelines in place and they educate technicians coming in that they have to follow these guidelines, social distancing, masks, increased disinfection. I would say that could probably start up, you know, in phase 1. That's
Great.
my thoughts right now.
Great, thank you, Dave. Okay, one last question, and this one goes back to the childcare issue, and that is, if somebody has FSA and they are not getting that childcare, you know, that they had signed up for, is that going to be extended? Are they going to be able to use that? This really sounds like an HR question, and maybe something that policy group is considering.
Yeah, I'm not recognizing FSA as an acronym, so I'm not sure I can comment.
It's the flexible spending accounts that people sign up for.
Ah, okay, good. Well, I still don't have a good answer. Darn it. I was going to use that as my excuse, Lisa. So I asked that question one more time.
There's always another lifeline.
Yeah, maybe so. So it was a question if FSA, you know, if the funds have run out, I think,
well, I'll tell you what, you've gotten a lifeline. Mike Stanley has jumped in to tell us that he was able to pause, and you can even cancel if you need to by reaching out to the benefits office. So that is a way to take care of that.
All right. Well, that's an area I hadn't been asked before. Mike Stanley, thank you for that help. If I don't think Doug Bonner was going to be able to join us today, but I also think, as you mentioned, that really is an HR question. And so between Mike Stanley and our HR folks, I think that'd be the best contacts to get a really good, firm answer on that.
Right. Well, I know we've had just a ton of questions, and appreciate you answering all those. And do you have some final thoughts for us, Tim?
Well, one final thought is I probably created more questions than I answered. So for that, I appreciate your patience. And I noticed actually Whitney's just put a note in about who to call about that benefits question. So very good. Thank you, Whitney.
Right.
You know, I think looking forward, I've thanked you 100 times for what you're doing, and I certainly continue to want to express my appreciation to you. I'd also say, as we start sort of phasing back up again, slowly and carefully, be careful. Let's keep our number of cases at 0. So when you're out, use caution, avoid crowds, wear a mask, wash your hands, take your temperature periodically. Let's continue to really keep ourselves healthy and maintain our 0 number of cases. I'd also say let us know if we can support you, if we're able to help in your situation some way. Please let us know that. We do appreciate all that you're doing, and we appreciate that you've got challenges both at home and with your work responsibilities. So reach out to us, stay in touch with your supervisor. And I really appreciate our supervisors, our directors, county directors, department heads, and so forth for the work they're doing. And I know it's frustrating when you feel like I'm not sure what to do. And then you ask the senior vice president, and he says, I'm not sure what to do. But we're in, times we've never experienced before. So be patient and be tolerant. We'll make up the best answers as we go, and we'll find solutions, and we'll learn from this. And we've already seen great examples of things that I'm sure we'll use in the future that have come out from this coronavirus experience. I want to say a special thanks to our UT Extension offices. Many of them are getting involved in distributing face masks to the public. That's a great, very visible example of how we're supporting and helping our communities. But it's also something that I know many other parts of our institute are doing on a daily basis. So thanks to all of you for helping our communities, helping the people that we live and work with to stay safe and really get through this coronavirus situation. So I think I'm going to stop right there and ask Lisa, what final comments or remarks would you have for us today?
Well, first, I'd just like to say that I know you spend a lot of time thanking all of us for what we're doing, but I do want to extend a thank you to you for taking the time each week to really answer some of these important questions and things that are lingering in people's minds. I think it really helps us all to stay grounded during what's an unprecedented time. And we've also been extremely pleased to see all of the input. I know you've seen it too, Dr. Cross, of all the just really innovative things that are going on within this institute. It's amazing what we produce. It's not gone unnoticed by others in Knoxville and even at the UT System office. And so we've been excited as an office to be able to produce these videos that you've been seeing. And today is the last of the trilogy of the videos that will be airing this week. So we're excited to share that with you. So Mike, if you will cue things up, we'll show the last one. We need audio. We need audio, Mike. Take 2.
At this time, we must be apart.
We are still connected.
While we accept the challenge of COVID-19,
we can still be patient, responsible, and
and share words of comfort.
While we stay safe and healthy.
We can still be there for each other.
And while we deal with this hardship,
we are still working for you.
At the UT Institute of Agriculture, we're bringing you real-life solutions, even as we work from home.
UT Ag Research still searches for technology and innovation to help grow our food supply.
The Herbert College of Agriculture continues to develop the next generation of talented scientists, educators, and leaders.
UT Extension still builds a stronger state with help for farmers, families, and you.
The UT College of Veterinary Medicine is still treating our animal friends, providing them with good health and a better life. Right, Cosmo?
So for now, take care of yourself and your loved ones.
If you're struggling, we understand.
We'll be back. You can count on it.
During this time, we hope you find strength and peace.
Because if there's one thing we know for sure,
is that we're still here for you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend.